Snehashish. Uh, what I'm going to speak about is doesn't so I would say. Uh, whereas whereas we get very excited about open data, there are a few huge security risks which comes with such open data. Uh, Mostly my research started when I looked at when there was some rumors and there was a press release by the Election Commission that they were about to sign a contract with Google for providing citizen services with respect to electoral rolls. And there was a lot of controversy around it, and there was a lot of writing in the papers. And finally, the Election Commission backed out, and there wasn't a contract which was signed. Now, moving out on from there, everyone talked about privacy, everyone talked about cybersecurity, but if you realize at a later point of time that the law actually mandates that the registration officer should publish the electoral rolls, whereas making it a public document. So I would start off with a concept which was propounded by Michael Gerstein. Uh, he's one of those experts on community informatics based out of Canada. So he draws sort of parallels between digital divide and then tries to talk about data divide in that context. So when we look at digital divide, quickly it means that bridging the gap between access as well as, and which is very, very important, is making sure that the technology is effectively used. Drawing a parallel to data divide, when we say data divide, we basically mean that you might have the data, but how effectively you can use it or abuse it is the question. And based on that, you should have regulations which protect your privacy, have security measures in place which makes it difficult to harvest this data. Now, when I say an electoral roll, what's its function? It has a major function in any election. So when you think about accountability and transparency, it's a key document, because if you have noticed, and if you have given a vote in the past, you will see a member of the political party sitting with the electoral roll, ticking off the names of each and every voter who comes by. So this is essentially to remove any kind of bogus voting, and this is a countermeasure for bogus voting. So the first security check is that you have the EPIC number, which is the election identification number, election photo identity card number, and then you match it with the electoral roll, and then you cast a vote. So for a free and fair election, electoral rolls are very, very necessary. The other thing which electoral rolls are used for is easier access to public information. So let's say you have registered on a wrong name, so either you can go and go and inspect that what's wrong in your EPIC, or someone from maybe your neighbor can say that this is not the person who stays next to me. So if you have a bogus voter who is right next, who's registered on an address which is yours, or someone right next door, you can authenticate or de-authenticate him or her. And then also, when we look at data, it's also used for evidence-based policy and evidence-based policy advocacy. So, for example, when we look at blocked URLs in India or blocked websites in India, so fortunately, people have leaked it. It's not open data per se. So if you go through the links, and you'll find out a fact that is overwhelming number of the URLs don't contain a notice which would say that this particular URL is blocked by this authority for this specific reason, and that sort of starts a chain reaction, and which amounts to violation of freedom of speech and expression, your right to judicial remedy, and rights like that. So if you can use this particular information which you have collated over the data you have and present it to the government, then you can make a good case, and you might see a change in the law, the regulation. And this particular evidence which I was talking about was implemented by the government of India, not in information technology rules, but in the copyright rules, which also includes takedown of content. So from now onwards, if you see a particular website is taken down for, let's say, copyright infringement,
and that misinformation, correct, accurate.
And only on citizen services, whereas
I'll
of election for election identity card and other things. So as I mentioned, these are the So I'll get down to what electoral rolls contain. So electoral rolls contain the name of the voter, relationship. So you have the husband of, wife of, the age of the person, the sex of the person, the address of the person, and the epic number. Now moving on from there. This is the most interesting part of my presentation. So if you look at this website, it is developed by Triple ID Delhi, and this is the information which is out there in the public domain. So you have the electoral rolls for voter card. For PAN card, you can sort of use the name and the date of birth to get it. So you can get the name and the date of birth from your voter card. So you can get your PAN card details from your voter card. Now, for driver's license for the National Capital Territory of India, it's a sequence. So it's your state name. So it will be, let's say, DELs hyphen the year of registry, the year you have registered your driving license, followed by a number. So if you use a algorithm to simply spider the particular website, you'll get all the details as to driver's license. And thereafter, you have directories. So you have MTNL and BSNL directories is available. So you have phone numbers, and then you can connect all of them together and name. So I'll do a quick search. And this is not where it stops. So if I just do Ashok Kumar, yeah. So this is the situation which we are in currently. So if I just do Ashok Kumar search, it will show me the name of the person, the voter ID card, the driving license, his father's name, his relative's name, because his father is also registered as a voter, and since the name is also mentioned as the father, son of, so you can make the connection, and there you have it. So right now this is the condition, and this is all open data. What are the major security threats? So we all know that we used to have directories and which used to sit at our home at a point of time, and we used to use it for different purposes. And it was never seen as a threat, but when you look at Truecaller, which is an app, it's very, very fearful, because you just put in a name and you can find who is it. So with the computational turn, these problems and security threats has risen by, I think, by exponential levels. So the digitization of the electoral database started around if I'm not mistaken, around 98. By 2010, the databases were stored in FoxPro and Microsoft databases. And still, I think fortunately that the whole database is not available as a single standardized, digitized form, where it would be a dream come true for open data geeks. And I would say that the more distributed it is, the more decentralized it is, the more it is in the analog form, the more secure it is. Because when the law was made in 1960, it used to be put up on a bulletin board or a notice board for people to come and see and go back. And whereas the distribution was to a certain extent that the MLA of that particular area will have access to the electoral rolls, and it was almost near impossible to sort of abuse this data. Now, when I say abuse this data, I can give you a very simple example. So, and it's not that even if it is analog, it is not being abused. In 1984 riots, we have seen that voter lists have been used to target marginalized communities. Now, I'll give you a simple example. If you go and search for baby names for a particular religion, you will find long lists of names. Now, you take that list, you match it with the electoral roll, you will find the density of a particular marginal community in a particular area. And that can be used for many different reasons, including riots, rigging of elections. But the same data can be used for good purposes. For example, if the Election Commission of India comes forward and finds that a particular area has a density of people who are maybe more than maybe of 65 years old or more, in that case they can have services which helps senior citizens to actually go and vote. So there's a flip side to it as well. So finally there was this by David Bilbo. He wrote a piece in Wired, if I'm not mistaken, where he talked about the dark side of Moore's law. So with great computational power comes great surveillance, and that's what he says. And I completely believe in it. With the amount of computational power which has increased, the amount of surveillance has increased many folds. So these are the main security threats which I've recognized. Now we're going to a bit of law and see what the government of India has done to actually protect this data. Because at the end of the day, if you look at the electoral rolls, it sort of supports one of the cornerstones of democracy, which is your voting and the right to vote and free and fair election. Now there is adequate law in place to make sure that this database is protected and also sort of maybe put under have encryptions or have purpose limitations as to its use. So if you look at section 70, it talks about protected systems, which will be notified by the government of India, which talks about systems which are critical to the national security, economic security of the country. The government has not notified it as a protected system. Then you have the reasonable security practices and procedures. So this is applicable only to companies per se, and because the people and because ECI, the Election Commission of India, which is involved in collecting this data, is not a corporation. This does not fall under this ambit. But if you look at what ECI does for the digitization process, it hires companies, and I haven't seen a single. So one of the companies is CMC Limited, which is a Tata subsidiary based out of Calcutta, and I haven't seen a single privacy policy on its website. And for that matter, I'm not sure who is handling the data. And for that, if you heard the last presentation, he's holding data of user data over I don't know how many years, over a year, and which is very scary for me. It's like even if it is not the government, it's a private company, it's scary for me. So that would be the second law which exists, and the third one would be the electronic service delivery rules. So the government of India specifically put out rules to ensure that the electronic service of deliveries, so including your application for your let's say your Aadhaar card, downloading your Aadhaar card from the website, or let's say maybe applying for, I'm not sure whether it's online, but other services. So and it requires, the rule requires that these services have to adhere to certain amount of encryption levels, and it has the power to actually notify certain services as coming under this under electronic service delivery rules. So if electoral rules, if electoral roles are considered to be a part of electronic service delivery, and the electronic form of it at least, then at least these rules needs to be followed. But the government of India hasn't notified the whole electoral roles as a part of it, so these rules don't apply. So what kind of checks and balances we can have is we can have purpose limitations. So Justice A.P. Shah committee, which was set up to look at the condition of the scope of having a privacy law in India, and it lays down around 9 principles, including consent of the data. So consent of the person who gives the data, including giving notice to the person who gives the data, and there are such other principles. So one of the principles is purpose limitation. So as to when you give out the personal information, what kind of use will it be put to is a big question. So there needs to be a limitation as to the purpose, and I strongly believe that there needs to be an amendment of the registration of electorals rules 1960, whereas it's clearly an archaic law, and it does not have any capacity to deal with digitization of electoral rolls and the multiple abuses of that particular rolls which can happen. And finally, we regulate the collection, usage, and storage and processing of databases, such as databases. Thank you.
Any questions? Ocean project. How did they manage to get the data? I mean, is it like they?
So if you see that all of them are interrelated.
Yeah.
So if you have the voter ID card details, which is available online on the ECI website, then you have the person's date of birth, father's name, and his or her name. So so if you go to the PAN card website to find out your PAN card details, you need your name and your date of birth.
So they map everything.
Yeah, you map it. And second, and this is for only Delhi.
Okay.
It's not for whole of India. It's only for Delhi. And second, for driving license, you go to the Department of Transport website, and they have just driving license number. So you see your driving license details. So for your driving license number is a particular sequence. So it's the capital or the name of the region, hyphen the year you have registered your driving license, and then followed by a number. So you just use an algorithm to do that for you, and you get that information as well. And there is no checks. This is not even a single captcha for that.
Snehashish, a couple of questions. In many other countries also the electoral roll is public information, so why in particular should there be not purpose, but the sort of wholesale siloing off that you're suggesting here? Because I think, and the reason why I mentioned this, I remember reading the CIS open data report, CIS open data report in 2011, which looked at election data and voter data as well from the 2009 Lok Sabha polls. And the one recommendation that I remember reading there, which is an interesting one, was they said the ECI data can be public, maybe sensitive information like addresses should not be there, and I believe there have been conversations with the Commission and state electoral offices on that as well. But given that even in other countries, and I was just checking actually, I think the UK electoral roll is also publicly searchable. I may be wrong, but it seems to be the case. Why should there be a restriction? Because I'm trying to understand, and I think many people in the open data space respect and strongly want to address privacy concerns. But is it wholesale siloing off, or is it just different ways in displaying and storing the information?
I think different ways in storing the information as well as displaying it. So I'm just trying to look at the computational term which has happened. So previously it was decentralized, and the security risks were not that high. But when you look at the digitization of it, there has to be certain checks and balances in place. So the decoupling between the offline and the online world is necessary.
But what's the sensitive data being kept here? So, because the other thing in privacy that's normally there is when there's sensitive personal data, right? And by the one thing I might understand here is address. There's no other information that's being provided here. For example, it's not census data. So, and you can actually go and buy census data. Of course, it's anonymized, right? But what's not being stored and distributed here publicly is, for example, caste affiliation, reserve status, all those sorts of things. Even reserve status in India is put up publicly sometimes, but it's not being put here. So I'm trying to understand for the design of the role and for any updates or recommendation that the community could take forward, what concretely right now are concerns that people have beyond address?
So beyond address, if you look at, you mentioned caste affiliations. It's a very simple task, or religion of the person. It's a very simple task to do. Once the computational return happens, you have a list of names, and let's say you have a list of the book on baby names which you find online, and you just cross-reference them, and you have it there. That this particular person belongs to this particular region or religion, or this particular person belongs to this particular caste, and at the end of the day, it becomes identifiable. And at least you have the, even if you redact the address, you have the ward, name of the ward, the name of the constituency which is there. So you can easily figure out what kind of density is there as to that particular religion or particular caste or community. And that makes it problematic for me, because if you add the ward name and to that particular, and to the number of, the name of the voters on that particular electoral roll, and then you do you run a simple algorithm, then you have the result which will be considered as sensitive personal data. So that might be made
conjecture, right? Technically, it's not sensitive personal data because there's not actually something that's confirmed.
You mentioned that caste affiliation can be considered to be sensitive
For
personal
example,
data.
if you go by my surname, I have one surname and I have Singh, which is actually supposed to be my surname. Singh could be Hindu, Singh could be Sikh. What I'm asking actually is that by that definition, any public listing of names, and it's an important question for people in open data. Any public listing of names, then technically speaking, is not something that can happen, right?
Including the name of the ward. So you are adding including the name of the ward and the name of the person. So if I'm an individual and I want to check my let's say my records on the electoral database, then I should have certain checks and balances in place where I can go and see whether it's correct or not correct. That's perfectly fine with me, but that should not be accessible to everyone.
To an extent, we can use Facebook itself, right? Facebook API.
Facebook is a choice. I can choose not to have that Facebook.
For a common man, who cares? I would want to share on Facebook.
But enterprise would want to.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Ahmed. The question I wanted to ask is, given that the data, as you said, the dark side of Moore's law is applicable now, isn't the conversation around privacy or the about of information also needs to change? I mean, I listened to a little bit of Jeff Jarvis, who talks about public parts and how a lot of our life is already public and already available online, and a lot of us are doing it actually in a very proactive way, that we make it even available, right? So isn't the conversation around what data is public, which may not be applicable before these laws were done, but now in this new context needs to change? I mean, the discussion around that probably needs to change, because some of the things that you are probably worried about is some things that other people may not be concerned about, and they would rather like their name out there to be known rather than be hidden behind some data walls.
So it's not like my concern or anyone's concern. So when we are talking about electoral rolls, it's basically dealing with elections. And when we talk about elections, it's the cornerstone of any democracy. And when we talk about anything at that level, it's generally connected to national security. So your privacy needs to be protected to ensure national security. So I do not see how the discussions can change with person to person, because at the end of the day, it ensures a free and fair election.
Can you envision a scenario where your darkest dreams would become reality? Because
The
a lot of
darkest
this,
being-
that's,
beings-
I think that seems
so-
to be the
So
Problem here.
even before digitization it happened.
You can think of it like during the Holocaust days of the Nazis. They just
No,
went through all those kind of things. Probably
one
that's the
one
darkest
thing
If
you
I may
mentioned is
answer,
the
if I-
1984 riots
Yes.
where people have electric
Yes.
doors and they went off. Is there anything else that you could imagine?
The same can happen. The same thing can
So
happen.
that's the only one.
And it can happen at a much more efficient level because it's computerized now and it is digitized. Voters lists were used during the 1984 riots too.
You believe because I just remember
Yes.
the IBM tabulating
Yes.
In a sense, if I'm talking about NSA, how is it working in the Middle East?
Yes.
So basically, the darkest days are already there. I don't think we have to
think about whether we are. I mean, the question of privacy is not
So
doubtful anymore. I think we all need to be very concerned about that. I'm just responding to his question where what are the darkest days that we envision? They're already here. And the NSA is using metadata on telephones, mobile phones, to get to the targets and blowing up people. They've done it several times now. And this is, I mean, obviously very technology again was used to implement some such systems, but the context of it was missing, and that's what it has led to now. And we need these conversations now.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a doubt about when you told the informations are spread across, which is more secure than being it in one place. Do you think having centralized data at one place and putting security checks for that data is more secure than having it spread across different area where you can just map it out? So it is win-win situation for open data people because everything is together in one place, and you can have that security check also in place so that it's not accessed in a registered format.
So data by its very nature, as you would know, is prone to leaks, and you have seen the critique with UID. So UID exactly tries to do that. It tries to store biometric data of each and every citizen in a particular database at a centralized location. The same can be done and stored in the particular UID card in a small chip where what happens with your driving license. Your driving license information is stored in a chip which is there on your driving license card. So now if this particular centralized database is attacked or maybe breached or there is some kind of compromise which happens, you lose everything. So let's say someone picks your pocket. Would you like to have all your money in a single place, or would you like to have it distributed all over all the pockets you have in your clothes? Which would be a better option? That's my question.
You have right and wrong for everything, right? You
No,
have it
like
distributed.
if you're talking about when you're talking about security, security is the best when it is distributed.
Yeah,
So I would say that security is at its best when it's distributed. And actually about distributed cybersecurity, you can actually look up Ron Degod from I think from University of Toronto in Canada, who talks about distributed cybersecurity, and I think that's the way forward.
There was a film in the 90s with Sandra Bullock. I don't know how many of you watched it, but this is what this conversation reminds me of. Basically, she just has all her information on the internet and one day it's deleted by the government, and then she's been convicted with murder and someone's chasing her. So when he was asking you the question, all I was thinking about was that movie and how it's turned into reality today. And because if you're talking about the amount of information that's available, someone can easily access my information, assume it, and my existence wouldn't be acknowledged anymore. And I don't know how that's not scaring anyone in this room.
On a lighter note, I'm scared of Anand more than the election commission of India. I'm cornering him right on during tea.
We're going to be quoting Anand a lot in the privacy talks.
Watch out, Okay, last two questions. Kaustubh?
you're doing a large honor.
So yeah, I'm talking about centralized storage of citizen data and personally identifiable information centrally. It's scary because not because you can add several layers of security to it, but data is, like Snehashish just said, very vulnerable to leaks, and we've seen a lot of data. There are a lot of people who be protecting it with security that is unmatched, being leaked over the last year or so. That's revealing things to us that we did not understand before. One of the things a friend of ours said, someone Snehashish works with, Sunil Abraham and I were in a discussion about the Aadhaar project and UID and the issues, problems we have with it and why centralized storage is bad. And Sunil went on to say, you know what India needs? India needs an evil Snowden. The problem with Snowden is he had conscience when he was leaking all this information, and he was doing everything he could to protect innocent citizens. We're talking petabytes of data, which is not a lot when we think about storage, all the personally identifiable information that the Aadhaar project is storing today, which is accessible to thousands of individuals across a couple of dozen agencies who are authorized to gain access to it. We need one or a few whistleblowers to actually just put this out as a torrent file on the internet, and then just try and imagine the implications of that. Centralized storage of data has always led to totalitarian regimes in the past. We've seen that. Everyone who hasn't should definitely read this book called IBM and the Holocaust. It's by Edwin Black. It thoroughly documents how the powers of Nazi Germany during World War II used IBM's technology, punch card technologies, to actually document and identify and then exterminate Jews across Europe and across these camps that were set up. And we've seen this happening and when we're talking about technology and how it's making it easier to securely store data centrally and how it's being used against innocent citizens in the past. So it is very, very scary thought, and we should be talking about it like a lot of other people are saying. But yeah, I think that's...
Yeah. I think one last one. Raman has a question.
Just a thought, because people were talking about centralized things, like all of those examples of centralization. I think Snehashish, what he said is digitization as the problem, right? Because if you look at it today, and the ideal for most open data people is to be able to have data up in formats that can be shared. If you have digitized roles available from different people, not even a central one, you'll have the same problem. You're going to worry about the accessibility of data per se. I think what you're going to have to look at that is that in the ideal electoral system for India in terms of open data, you would you have constituencies, you have state electoral officers putting data up, that can also all be mined. So your worry is that essentially when you have digitized data, what can be done with it? You want to put regulations and rules on that. The interesting thing again, and therefore I'm putting that as a strong suggestion for people to look at, is that if names per se is something you do not want up on the web, you are not going to have open data in this country beyond just aggregated statistics. There again, you're going to have identifiers. Ironically, what you're actually saying is then you need Aadhaar, because Aadhaar is there at the back end as the identifier you can use in the government. By the way, this is exactly what's said when people say they don't put names publicly up. So sometimes when discussing privacy concerns, my thought is that it might be interesting to stop looking at the name point per se and then understand what data is being put up publicly that you don't want. For example, I actually find it more disturbing when people put rural employment data up and they link what payments people are getting, the amount they're getting, because I actually think that can sometimes be bordering and offensive. But that's fine. But if you're saying per se, even names should not be put up, I find it interesting because the EC has done a fairly good job of not putting up most sensitive data. And even if their standards are something which we're not happy with, we're probably going to be in this extremist position between people who want everything up and people who want nothing up. So that's the thing there. What I'm saying here is that I don't think centralization is the point is coming across here for many people. It's actually the idea of making digital data up per se. And given where we are and like 60% of the people in this room are all playing with that data, then is it that even names per se or things of that level we're not comfortable with? In which case we've actually reached a breaking point. Things, you won't be able to merge these two positions together. But just a thought, sorry, a bit long.
So to respond to you, so I said three things, which is digitalization, centralization, and standardization. If you look at the electoral rolls or the electoral database, it has a particular purpose, and it is limited to those purposes, as I would like to put it, which is authentication, countermeasures for bogus voting, and finally your free and fair election, which is accountability and transparency. So I do not see what kind of other purposes it will have. But sorry.
The last one tell you, right? The free and fair election and transparency. You're just thinking all the ideas that people have to hackathon tomorrow, and then you also goes into that category. That's why I don't understand, because it's an important question, and that idea of purpose limitation leads to the idea of the general open data philosophy and this free and fair election bit. It makes it a very wide canvas. That's it. Sorry.
Yes. So and that was possible, and that was happening when in the 1960s, where people were putting up your electoral rolls on a notice board, and it was also available with the particular political parties. And even in 98, I think 2000, around 98, 2000, they used to sell CDs to public containing the whole electoral rolls. Yeah, you can still buy it. Yeah, so but right now it's not standardized. So if you go to Jharkhand's, if you look at Jharkhand's electoral roll, it's still in Hindi. So you cannot really use the same computational power which you can use with a standardized and centralized list. And I'm sure that people can have that resources to actually put it together and centralize it if it is at different parts, but just making it more difficult is the question. How difficult would it be to do it?
Thanks, Snehashish. So I think we'll stop here for tea. So we'll take a break for 20 minutes. And so we'll meet at 3:50. 15 minutes break.